Hello, everyone. Welcome to a special edition of Speaking Moistly. With me today is Chelsea Hillier, former PPC candidate from 2021. And you ran a great campaign. I watched your campaign, and like I mentioned it on my show a lot. And I was like, I was a big fan. So well done,
Thank you.
well organized. How did you find that campaign?
The campaign was amazing, crazy, exhausting, exhilarating. It was really an amazing thing to be part of, and to sort of be at the center of. Um, it sort of feels in one way a lifetime ago, but that I'm also still experiencing basically a campaign hangover three
Yeah.
weeks later. No, it was amazing, and you know what? It really I've been working in this sort of realm for the last 20 months, and it really felt like a coming together of everything that I've been working on for 20 months. And yeah, it was great.
Yeah, it was neat to see all of the people. Like you would regularly have rallies, and there was a lot of people who turned up, and like just all of the controversy. You said it seemed like a lifetime ago, and yeah, man, I can't believe not necessarily the change since September 20th, but maybe the complacency. It feels like people are kind of geared down, and we're on cruise control now, and nobody's really worried about the crazy stuff that's happening. And it feels like we should be worried about it. I feel worried about it, right?
I think the campaign took over everything. Not just for me. I think for all Canadians, and well, at least all Canadians working in the sort of freedom movement. And I think that there is certainly a need at this point for people to decompress a little bit. But I will tell you that there is a lot of stuff happening in the background still. And the really cool thing that happened is that the campaign awoken a whole segment of the population that had been standing on the sidelines watching what was going on. So for all of us, veterans who've been doing this the whole time, I think we're kind of, not all of us, but me anyway, and I know a handful of others are sort of taking a little bit of a step back. But all of this new blood has come into the freedom movement, and I know that they're all working really hard, and we've got big things that are coming down the pipe. So hopefully we can regain some of the momentum that we had during the campaign and keep it going.
Yeah, well, it is quite interesting because there is the opportunity for building the party, building the movement just against lockdowns, against the tyranny we're living under, I guess, right now. Um, and I found that one of the big deficits for me from 2019 to 2021 was that I was like, where are the PPC? Where's Max? Like, and it was kind of, they hadn't found their stride yet. And I watched Max yesterday at the Leafs opener. And I said on my show today, like, he's the hardest working politician in Canada. I think like he's making the right moves now. So that's a righting of that ship, which I'm very glad for. He's doing a leadership review, another thing that's great. And so I'm seeing the PPC moving in the direction that I was hoping they would move, a little slower than I was hoping, but I'm happy to see it. And I think other people are as well. And that shows as well in the turnout and like the results from the last election. You jumped over the Greens and got 5%. Like, that's incredible. Like, yeah. So something to be proud of. And it's like, politics is so frustrating because it's like 5% and you're like, not that you shouldn't be happy about that, because it's contextual where you were compared to where you are. But it seems like to look at that as a success would be weird, but it's not weird because it is such a big increase, right?
Well, there's a lot of good things that came out of the election. The party growth was amazing. And there were some really, really amazing, strong candidates that came out of the election for the PPC. And we were able to start rebuilding the infrastructure that was lost after 2019. So I know that a big focus right now is setting up really strong riding associations across the country. Because people like myself and other candidates did break the 10% mark. So we do get funding in the next election. So we need to make sure that infrastructure that was lost is regained and strengthened. And I feel positive. I think that there's a lot of people wanted to vote PPC and they didn't, for a number of reasons that are horribly disappointing. But I do think that we'll see more exponential growth in the next election, without a doubt.
Yeah, and I hope so. I hope that the growth trend continues, and I hope that we're on that path. It certainly seems like Aaron O'Toole is committed to making that happen for everyone. So I appreciate the focus on eggs and beer.
Listen, like there were times in this election campaign where my campaign manager and I would look at ourselves and say, like, what, like, he is literally giving us votes.
Yes, yeah.
Like he's just giving us votes.
Yeah.
Now did that translate to a win? No, it didn't. But I think that it made a lot of conservative voters seriously question the motives of the Conservative Party. But I think a lot of the PPC growth, of course, a lot of it came from the Conservative Party, but it actually came from the Liberals and the NDP as well. I mean, I had people on my team and phone calls after, and who came from all political stripes, and I suspect that as this COVID-19 world moves on and continues, because I don't think that it's going to end anytime soon, we're going to see support bleed from all of the parties. But certainly Aaron O'Toole is doing the best job alienating his base. That's without a doubt.
He is, and not just the base, like people who would give his party a look, like coming from the Liberals. Yes. Maybe they've lost. It's lost its charm, right? The socks and the hair are just not doing it anymore, and they're looking for something else. And they look at Aaron O'Toole and they say, well, these policies are exactly what I was running away from. So yeah, it is really interesting. I'm interested in what's going to happen in Ontario with regards to the Ontario politics. It doesn't seem, and you're in Ontario, just in case there's people watching who don't know. Your dad is in the legislature in Queen's Park. And I feel like I wish that there was a party that was running against Doug Ford, right? Like I wish there was, because in my brain, and maybe like I'm just a guy in my garage, right? And I say that a lot, but in my head, we'd have a leader making a throne speech. We'd have somebody saying, this is the alternative vision I have for Ontario. This is how we can fix these problems. And then start introducing candidates, start introducing cabinet level people. And like, if this person is the education minister, this is what that person's going to do. And then unleash them, like really get them in there and into the fight. And like, I know you're federal. I ran for the PPC in 2019 federal, but it's one of those things where when I really look at the policies, it's the provincial stuff that's really hamstringing us. And who are we going to vote for? Andrea Horwath? Right? Like,
well, so this is like, okay, so I don't have all of the information. I don't have the full story. I know that there is a huge push to do exactly what you're speaking of. And this is what I tell everyone, like one of the biggest issues, especially towards the end of the campaign, was that the Conservative politicians, the Conservative incumbents especially, started the narrative that, the issues that I was talking about, the issues that the PVC were talking about were provincial issues. And so like they had washed their hands of it. It had nothing to do with them. Mm-hmm. And of course, in some ways that's true, except for when our federal government is allowing the provincial governments to totally contravene our Constitution and our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. That is certainly a federal issue.
Yeah, massive.
And like, I mean, if the federal government, if the federal MPs don't see that is their job to step in, mm-hmm. In that situation, then we've got a huge issue. Mm-hmm. But without being too denigrating, like most Canadians, or a lot of Canadians, are unaware of how our political system actually works. Yep. And they're unaware of how issues are separated by jurisdiction. And so when I would try to explain to them why these issues do fall under federal jurisdiction, it couldn't translate. It didn't translate. Yeah. And so I actually think that we have a really good opportunity to do something provincially because people are able to connect those dots more easily.
Yeah. I remember that from my campaign as well. Like people would ask me what I was going to do about education, and I'd be like, nothing, like nothing. So, and not because I don't care about education, I care deeply about education, but that's not the role of the federal government. And yeah, there's a huge misunderstanding, or there's a huge, well, even Cam Guthrie, I talk about, he's the mayor of Guelph, so I talk about him a lot. He fields questions all the time. Like, even for me at times, like there have been times where I've asked him a question and he's like, yeah, that's the provincial government, or that's the federal government's responsibility, not municipal. But sometimes I'm saying you should be standing up to these people for,
Well, and like,
who elected you.
isn't part of being an elected representative to advocate for the people that you represent?
Yeah.
And so when it comes to jurisdiction, I mean, yes, your influence can only be, to a point, but your job is to represent and advocate for the people that have elected you.
Yeah.
And so this idea that politicians can just like happily wash their hands of these issues when their constituents are suffering is well, frankly, is disgusting. And I think that was one of the messages that we tried to put out during the election, was like, we want to do politics differently. We want to do it properly. We don't want to be people who just wash our hands of responsibility and point the finger at the next guy. Like, we are truly passionate, and we want to help to fix the system.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting being on. Did you debate? Did you get onto any debates?
I did a couple of debates. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you do the main? Were you able to get onto the main, like the Commons, the Chamber of Commerce?
I was on the Chamber of Commerce debate.
You did? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So I was on the Chamber of Commerce debate. I thought that was interesting. It's interesting. So my dad's friend was going to see, like, my dad's friend from work. My dad worked in Mississauga, but he always commuted from Guelph. So my dad's friend ended up being at the debate that I went to, and his friend was leaning conservative, and he said, "Oh, well, your son's running for PPC, like, good luck, but I'm going to be voting for the CPC." By the end of the debate, he had changed his mind, right? And so, and he said that I was the best candidate, and then he would be voting for me. So it was interesting for me to experience that, and not necessarily think that I'm the best candidate, but I thought I was probably better. I thought I was probably the best candidate, and then not have it translate, right? And yes. Like, I'm okay to lose. I'm okay to lose, yeah. But it's like, how do you that machine, that liberal machine, that conservative machine, when it doesn't translate on the ground, but you can connect with people like that, it's very like, wow, where's that missing, right?
Oh yeah, the chamber debate was my favorite debate, I think, that I did. And but it wasn't my favorite because it was fun or enjoyable. I was furious the entire time. We're talking about politicians, or wannabe politicians, speaking to the people that they apparently want to represent, and literally not talking about the fact that businesses have been closed for most of the year, that they're still open under heavy restrictions, that our businesses are failing, that our government feels like it's totally okay to just lock up a business and walk away. And now with vax passports that people, that servers are having to enforce, and on and on. I mean, no one talked about it. And it's literally, I sort of hesitate to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway, because this is a frank conversation. I walked away from that debate feeling like I had just went up against 3, maybe 4 monsters with big grins on their faces. That they're monsters. These people, I'm sorry, they don't care. They don't. All they can do is talk party line and never actually face what people are going through and what our government is doing to people. And so I wasn't smiling during that debate. I was furious. I was angry, but I was furious and angry because I actually care about the people who are suffering. I'm not going to sit there with a big smile on my face while we quote unquote debate. Dance around the issue, talk about climate change, but ignore the closed businesses. Exactly. During the 2019 cycle, I was at a couple of high school debates, and the high school debates were really interesting to me. And one was Bishop Mac, but the one that I'm talking about, you can actually still see the one I'm talking about at
on YouTube on my Mark Paralavis channel if you're interested. But during that debate, there was a question on free speech, and the question was like, basically, do you believe in free speech? And my answer was, free speech is the cornerstone of our democracy. Without free speech, you can't identify the problem and move to solve it. Right? Without free speech, you have no vehicle to solve the problem, basically. And everybody else on the panel basically said, well, within limits. And then they got to the liberals and the conservatives, and I couldn't believe it. And I was like, how have I missed? Like, these people have obviously been prepped that free speech is no longer in vogue. And I'm the idiot, like I'm the rube talking about like that's our rights and stuff. And the kids loved it, right? The kids thought they thought I was the best answer or whatever. But I noted it, and I looked down the table and I was like, I can't believe that there are these people who are telling these high school students that, yeah, free speech is really important, but some speech, to protect people, we need to limit it and blah, blah. No. That's not how this works.
Well, I mean, it's all part of the like upside down backwards world that we live in, right? Where we say that like language is violence. Yeah. But then when we actually see people suffering, and when people are actually, dealing with basically abuse from their, like, not basically, being abused by their government, that it is not seen as violence or as abuse. Language is. And so it's all part of this this thread that weaves through everything that we're living through right now, which is, limit free speech because speech is violence. And then no one can actually talk about what's going on and the suffering that people are enduring because language is violence, and it's totally controlled by the state and by MSM, which it is at this point.
Yeah. Well, and the actual violence goes undocumented, unreported, like not talked about, right? The fact that I've started calling it the premier's rape fantasies, right? Like getting people into, right? To I'm not participating in that, Doug. Like, I'm sorry, man. Like, you do you, but I'm not doing that. And I think that it maps pretty well. Like, if somebody said to you, in order to keep your job, we've got to stick this in you.
Yes.
That's intolerable, right? That would be intolerable for me. And so why does that change now that there's a vaccine attached to that violation?
Listen, one of my great friends, my lifelong friends, resisted as long as she could. And she finally gave in and went and got the vaccine for her job. And she cried the entire time. She told them that she didn't want it. They actually physically removed her from the space and put her into a separate room so that they could inject her with this vaccine that she absolutely didn't want. And I'm sorry, but that sounds a lot like rape. It's like, it's horribly disturbing. And so that's not seen as violence. But saying that you don't want the vaccine is seen as perpetrating violence on a population.
Right.
Because all of a sudden you don't care about your actions and how they affect other people. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
It's round the bend. But they're going to use this logic because it's a quasi legal framework, right? They're going to use this logic to remove people. They're going to say, I think they're going to do it soft first, and soft meaning they'd rather the family eject a single person from the family and have everybody else comply than having to go in and like extract that person, right? You want the family to push them out. So they're gonna like, if you have an unvaccinated person in your household, these are your new rules. But if you don't have an unvaccinated person, then whatever, and then they'll do it hard. But I think that we're going the direction of Australia, and there's no, if somebody shows up and says, this app here says that you've got COVID, so you've got to come with me, there's no due process. There's no like, okay, I'll call my lawyer and we'll talk about when I'm going to surrender and what are the bail conditions. None of that. There's no bail conditions.
Well, I mean, like, I don't know if you know anyone who has been contact traced through this whole year or year and a half.
Yeah, not personally, I don't think.
Right. So because I've been with No More Lockdowns and because I ran the campaign, like, people call me and tell me all these crazy stories,
I get stories, lots of them too.
Yeah. If you're contact traced, you're not told where you were. You're not told where you were, because they can't identify, someone's medical status. So the public health can literally just call you and say, you've been, in the same place as someone who tested positive COVID. We're not going to tell you where that was. We're not going to tell you when it was, but you're now in quarantine for 14 days.
Wow.
That's insane.
That's
Like,
insane. It is.
how do you know I was there? People use fake names, fake phone numbers. Like, how can you prove that I was anywhere?
Yeah.
And you're not even going to tell me where that place was?
Yeah.
I mean, that's like when the government can literally just call you up and give you zero information to say you are now not allowed to leave your home for 14 days.
Yep.
That's pretty scary.
Prison sentence with no due process at all, right? And I think it's only going to expand. They're not stopping anything. And so that's what I mean. I would love an opposition to Doug Ford. I would love somebody to stand up and say the first thing we have to. But it has to be not organized. Well, organized, like there has to be onboarding. One of the things that I think the People's Party is getting better at, but still not great. But all of the other ones too, onboarding, like when members join, you get like an email, but you have to tell a story. You have to grab the people, because otherwise they're not going to care. And like, not necessarily like bomb their inbox or anything like that, but make it not a club they want to be a part of, but kind of,
Well, listen, like communication is a huge issue, and it's an issue, across the board.
Yeah.
And I know for the PPC specifically, like they're a very small team of guys running the entire national party. And especially, between 2019 and 2021, there was a complete breakdown of communication with their members, which is one of the reasons that I was able to gain so much support and do so well, because it was constant communication with the people who had signed up. But I also had the infrastructure because, like I said, I had been working with No More Lockdowns. And so I was able to build a website and use Nation Builder and, have a full infrastructure to actually launch a campaign, which most PVC candidates certainly don't have. And so, I think headquarters is trying right now to really like amp up their communication strategy. But then when you look at the other parties, like the Conservative Party, I still can't believe that so many people voted for them. Like their mailers that they were doing were literally like 10 pages of text, and it was done in a way that looked like it had been written on a typewriter.
Yeah. I got a letter from Pierre Poilievre. Yeah.
Exactly. And like that's their marketing strategy. That's their communication strategy, is 10 pages.
Their target is people who read white papers, right?
Yeah.
So I guess like it,
I don't know. I thought it was insane, but you know what? That letter from Pierre Poilievre worked. And that's something like, man, there's still a lot of people on our side of this fight who think that Pierre Poilievre is the game changer and the one who's going to save the Conservative
paper tiger.
Party. Yeah. And I'm like, are you kidding me? He's like, the Conservative Party uses him to put out a specific message that the party's not going to put out.
Yeah.
But they allow him to do it. And it's never any real opposition other than in some financial matters.
Yeah.
But like, he is an establishment politician and he's acting as an establishment politician. But when that letter went out, that changed the course of everything from him.
So for Poilievre or for the campaign?
Well, I think it changed the trajectory of my campaign without a doubt, because it was a letter about the vote splitting.
Yeah, it was.
Because people on our side of the fight still trust him and see him as some kind of heroic figure. A lot of people, I think, switched sides. So obviously they know what they're doing. It just shocks me that their establishment tactics still work.
Yeah, well, it's like running into a buzzsaw. Like it is like the big establishment parties, like the Liberals, the Conservatives, to make the inroads. I mean, honestly, that's why we said at the beginning, 5%. That's a huge victory, because I mean the Greens totally imploded this cycle, and so making gains off of everybody is something to celebrate. I don't get how the Bloc is doing so well. It's like, where do these people, where do they come from? Like, what is this?
Well, I have no idea what is going on in Quebec in that regard. Like it seems very strange. And, maybe they do so well because they are outside of, like, in some ways they're outside of the establishment, but they are of the establishment still.
Yeah, I was going to say
they tread that sort of line that seems to work for them.
Yeah, well, Blanchette's totally on board with whatever Trudeau wants to do. He's like, you want to pass C10? Let's pass C10. Let's get rid of theirs.
Well, and listen, why wouldn't he be? Because it's working for him.
Yep.
You know, like
Yep.
it works for him. And what does he want? He wants a seat in the House of Commons. And so, you know,
Yep.
so do it.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
that's
It's
if all you're concerned about is getting your seat,
yeah.
then yeah.
Right. Well, and yeah, I think that kind of a pseudo balance of power, like Jagmeet and Blanchett are both, two sides of the same, or two
Yeah.
two sides of the different same coin. And if Trudeau doesn't get one of them, he'll get the other, for different reasons. So
Yeah. They're just there to prop up.
yeah, yeah, and it's the perfect storm of like a minority government that's very strong, but still does things that Trudeau doesn't like. But we could have that. We could have this for the next 4 years. Like,
Yeah.
it's frustrating. It's
I
frustrating.
know, I know. But like this is what you get when you have a population who is, I mean, I hate to say, I generally have really good, I have a great regard for humans. I love humans,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean that they're not disappointing. And, and, I can love them and be disappointed at them at the same time. But yeah, when you have a disengaged electorate
Yeah.
who, doesn't understand how the system works or even why it exists,
Well, and
this
the
is
other,
what you get.
they're so like the idea of having a robust political conversation flies in the face of everything that like we're taught that Thanksgiving dinner or Christmas dinner or any like family gathering should be. And it's funny, like my family, we'll have an okay debate around the table, and people are okay to disagree and all that kind of stuff. I think I'm probably the most out there. My sister didn't want to mention flat Earth just in case I believed in it, so I started messing with her about it. I was like, really, flat Earth? All right, man. Okay. So,
I mean, that's the propaganda though, right?
well,
It's like,
right,
oh, if
yeah.
you don't believe in COVID, in being in the middle of a massive pandemic, then you must believe in the flat earth.
Then you're a flat earther. I
What?
was like, no, I mean, okay. My mom mentioned it, and I thought it was hilarious. So then at dinner time, I started talking, like kind of dropping hints about it.
That's so funny.
It's a lot of fun.
If you ever want to mess with someone, so I'll tell you, we're going way off course here.
Yeah,
But
that's
I'm
all
gonna
right.
tell you. Okay, so like last year, during lockdown, I was on Twitter and I came across, this post about a flat earth, and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to go into this thread and I'm just going to gut myself laughing, and it's going to be the
Yeah,
funniest stuff ever.
yeah,
And then I went into it, and like 2 hours later I was still in the thread, and I was
yeah.
like, oh my gosh, like, oh
Wait
my
a
gosh,
second.
what just happened? But it happened because someone, some person put as a comment like, well, water always finds its level, and
Mhm.
that's how you justify flat earth.
Right. Yeah.
And so that hooked me, and I was just
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
like now I need to find out as much as I can. And
Yeah.
then after 2 hours I was like, oh my gosh, get out of this thread and never
Yeah.
ever talk about flat earth again, like just don't do it. But
Yeah. Well,
and
I
so
mean,
for the most part I've held to it, but once in a while when I come across someone who is like, because I don't care, like if you believe in the flat earth,
yeah.
then
Yeah.
then
Sure.
go for it.
What does it matter? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not a flat earther, but I don't
Yeah.
care if someone else is.
Right. Yes.
But
Exactly.
when I find someone who really, really cares and just wants to like be the worst human and just talk down to all these people, I just say like, water always finds its level.
Yeah.
And then it's like just because I know that it's like a little hook,
Yeah. Yeah. And that'll get people. That'll get people. But it's super interesting, and it's like I had somebody send me a video about flat Earth, and it was probably I don't know, 45 minutes or an hour and 10 minutes or something like that. It was like an off time for a documentary, and I like documentaries, so I was like, okay. I watched it. I thought it was interesting, and fundamentally, I think that like it doesn't change anything for me, right? If the earth is round or if the earth is a flat or whatever, like my experience is not going to change. So I don't care one way or the other. And like, I like to know what the other side thinks. Like if you're like an absolute flat earther, I want to kind of understand the argument, right? So like, I'm interested. That's fine. You can believe what you want to believe.
Yeah.
And it doesn't hurt me. And if I'm wrong, it doesn't hurt me if it's a sphere or if it's flat, it doesn't bother me. I don't care.
Well,
So,
this
but
is,
other
I mean,
people get so upset about it. I'm like, what does it matter,
isn't
man?
that a nuance that is missing from everything? Like, you know what? It's actually really compelling. It's a compelling argument.
Oh yeah,
And
there's a bunch of stuff.
yeah, and it's completely outside of my realm of
Oh
actual
yeah.
understanding, you know?
Yeah.
And so like I like to talk to pilots about flat earth theory just because I think that they have the best insight into
Yeah.
it. And they have an understanding that I don't have,
Yeah.
you know? But I find it incredibly compelling. And so like what you're right, nothing changes.
No, it doesn't
Nothing
change
changes.
anything. Yeah.
But it is interesting,
Yeah.
and understanding the other side then helps you to understand,
How
you
the
know,
science works. Yeah.
exactly.
Well, I mean, like one of the things that I was talking about with my wife, because I told her, I was like, so my mom thinks I'm a flat earther. And so we were looking up, I said, but look, like the moon's a sphere, so it makes sense. So is like Jupiter, so is Mars, so is all the other heavenly bodies. So, you know, it would make sense if you're looking at, right? Is this all an elaborate hoax? Right? Like, I'm not crazy, right? Like, right? Like we're a flat earth that looks out into a sphere, like with spheres all around. That seems like a misdirection at best, right? Like, so, and so if you want to, like, there's a whole bunch of very compelling things that are, you know, not true or whatever, but it's super interesting to be like, yeah, like you could reason your way there. Like I can see it.
Yeah.
I can see why you get there.
Well, you're also questioning what you've been told.
Sure.
And this is like, I mean, it's an amazing thing to me to see how this has progressed over time. Where, you know, to question what is going on, to look around and say, like, I actually have questions because my experience is different than what I'm being told is happening. You know, that is now an unacceptable thing to do. And so, you know, so when someone says that they have questions about flat earth, they're immediately
dismissed.
Completely dismissed. Just like when you say, I have questions about the COVID pandemic, you are completely dismissed.
Right.
And we are told not to believe what we see with our own eyes, right?
Yeah.
So
well done. Well done. Really well done bringing it back to the COVID thing, because they are very comparable. And I wanted to tie that up just even a little bit more. So yeah, I look up in the sky and I see the moon, and I see the moon as a sphere. But at the same time, if I see an airplane flying overhead and it's got a contrail, the contrail doesn't rise like the moon or the sun. The contrail does something different. Why is that? Like, what's the scale here? Like, how do I need, right? So like, I have questions that are legitimate questions that don't have an explanation. And I think that the world that we experience, the world that we inhabit, is far more weird and crazy, and the possibilities are way more than we could even comprehend. I think the world is stranger than we could even understand. And we're expected to, like, you know, just accept that somebody knows the real answer, and it's definitely spherical, and don't ever talk about it again. Right. Or COVID is definitely this pandemic, and, you know, don't ever have those questions again.
Exactly.
Right? It's like, okay,
no,
we're gonna
absolutely. And that's the world that we live in. And like, heaven forbid you actually ask a question.
Yes.
Because like, you will be viciously attacked. As I'm sure you have been. I've been viciously attacked for 20 months now. And in fact, it's getting worse. Like, it's just getting absolutely worse, where like, I can't even put out, you know, a thought. Like, oh, well, this thought came into my mind, and so I'm going to put it out there, without just being absolutely jumped on. And like, the things that people say to me when I ask a question or say what I'm thinking it's horrifying.
Yeah,
Truly
it's
horrifying.
interesting. I think that there's elements of bot farms and macro keys and demoralization tactics being used. I think we're in the midst of a psychological, if not like experiment, total unrestricted warfare. And I mean, like, that's a big range. So like, I'm willing to entertain the idea that it's not total war. I'm willing to entertain the idea that somehow the scientists somewhere said, you know, this is going to be good for them, and they convince people or something like that. I don't know that that's true, but like, I'm willing to entertain a range. But I think the result is a population that doesn't know what to believe. Like, from COVID to
That's right. Well, and so how do you get to a place where you have a great many people who believe in flat earth? And listen, they might be right. I'm not I have a friend who says that he's a flat earth agnostic, and I sort of like that saying, right? But like,
Yeah.
how do you get to a place where people are actually questioning whether we live on a flat surface or on a sphere?
It's ancient. It's ancient.
Well,
This isn't new.
the
The whole idea of a flat
proliferation of
earth.
it,
Yeah.
like there has been a proliferation of it, I think.
Yeah.
And well, you get there because
In
we're lied to about everything.
everything. In 2015, oh man, the flat earth thing gets even more weird. Do you want to hear how weird it gets?
Let's
Oh,
hear.
it's one of the things that kicked off this YouTube censorship. The flat earth stuff got removed off YouTube because it was gaining some real traction because it is ancient. Like it's one of those things where it's like if you look in history books before a certain date, like that was the accepted reality.
Yeah,
like
of
this is
course.
we live in a flat earth, right?
Yeah.
And they had theories, like they had a very robust way of explaining how the earth fits in and the whole thing. And I mean, like I guess they didn't have telescopes, right, to look at the sky and stuff. But the other so that's the first thing that happened was they removed it from YouTube. So gone. You can't now access this. And that was one of the first. And the second thing, I was watching a Joe Rogan thing, and I think it was Johnny Bravo. He was talking about how all the space stuff, it's all cartoons. He's like, we don't have images of like the Earth flying. Like you would think, go park a spaceship 50,000 kilometers off Earth and watch it. Like like here's the Earth flying by, right? We don't have that. Why don't we have that? We should be able to have that.
That makes me think. Remember the guy who jumped out of the airplane or spaceship
Red
or
Bull.
whatever it was for the Red Bull thing,
Yeah.
and like plummeted to Earth? Like,
Yep.
I mean, that was the weirdest
Yeah, it's
thing.
weird.
But the first time I ever actually really heard, like the first time I ever engaged with anything to do with flat Earth was a number of years ago, before I had kids, so probably like 10 years ago. I used to work in a restaurant when I was in my early 20s, and I worked with this guy, and we both sort of left the restaurant at the same time, and then we didn't talk again for years and years. And one day he sent me a message on Messenger and said, "Hey, did you know that the Earth is flat?" And I was like, okay. And I was like, ha, 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 you're so funny. Yeah. And he was like, no, seriously, I'm a pilot and I'm telling you that the Earth is flat.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, well, I'm done with this conversation. And that was
But the flight, if you look at a flight book, like part of that documentary, it takes an image of a flight book and it says they're flying over a flat plane, like you're flying over a flat plane. So,
yeah, I mean, listen, I have other friends who are pilots now, and they say absolutely the Earth is not flat.
Yeah, no, well, right, same thing. I have pilot friends as well, and one of them said, "Next, you're going to tell me that there's the jet things."
The contrails?
Yeah, but it's they're using it to
the chemtrails.
Chemtrails, that's it. And so he was a total like he's like, I don't believe any of it. He's like, it's all just a lie. I was like, well, that's the hallmark of this. That's the point. You cannot know. Yeah. And like, I'm not advocating for flat Earth. I'm just saying, who cares one way or another? I'm not advocating for right. Like that's it. But the point is that they want to force you into a position, and if you're in the wrong one, they want to make you feel terrible about it. But the reality of the world is far more strange than we can fathom, I think. And like I don't think anybody really has the answers, and if they think they do, I can ask a question that'll confound them because nobody knows the answer, right? Like what happens after you die type deal. So
yeah, well, listen, I mean, I think that's you sort of encapsulate like where we're at in this time is like, we don't have all of the answers.
Yep.
And we also know that we aren't being told the truth about everything.
Yep.
And so I think it is human nature to have questions in the situation, in the time that we're living in. And so because they know it's human nature, they need to shut it down. And they're ready, to pounce. As soon as someone has a question, they're ready to pounce. And they don't do it with information. They don't do it with facts. They don't do it with data. They do it with emotion.
Yep.
And that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. Yeah, I think you're 100% right. I think that's a good place to leave it. I think that we've got it. Do you have
So
any?
this is just like the flat Earth show, basically.
The flat Earth talk. Well, I mean, kind of, but it's just a good analogy, I think. Like, and I mean, I hope it's probably going to be totally misrepresented. I hope it's not.
Oh, I'm sure it will be.
It.
You and I are now flat earthers.
Flat earthers, totally. Yeah.
No,
that's okay.
Anyway, yeah, I mean, I think we can certainly leave it, but it is an interesting. It's an interesting point, which is just that asking questions is not actually inherently bad or morally wrong.
No,
and it shouldn't be made to be that way. And when you encounter someone who is asking a question, that question, there's no morality around the question.
No.
But that's what we're making it a moral thing. To ask a question is morally or ethically wrong. And it's not. And most people asking questions are actually really good people.
Yeah, well, and curious people, and people who want to be to get as close to the truth as possible, because like as you said, we're not being told the truth about things. We're being fed a very carefully constructed lie about things. And so, like, to poke holes in the lie, it's
and even when they tell you the truth, like when the CDC comes out and says 6% of COVID deaths were actually just with it and not of it. Or when they come out and say the PCR test can't determine between the flu and the common cold and COVID, when they tell us the truth, we are so conditioned to not ask questions that factual data that we are actually being given is dismissed and forgotten.
Yeah, well, and I mean, like, other places, there's a place in India that was using a horse medication, and it has worked wonderfully. And like that, it's like that hasn't happened at all. So like asking a question about that, it's like you bring up flat Earth.
Well, listen, actually, okay, so we're going to wrap up here, but I have a really interesting anecdote to end this on. I have a great friend. Her and her husband have lived in Southeast Asia for 15 years. They actually just came home.
Why?
Well, because they were living in Singapore, and Singapore is a communist surveillance state at this point.
Wow.
No joke. Her 9-year-old son has to wear a neck tracker. So he's not allowed to leave the house without it, and he's not allowed to enter his school or anywhere else without the neck tracker because he doesn't have a phone. So they put a tracker around the kid's neck.
That's scary.
Yeah. So anyway, but the point is that, I mean, that could be a point in and of itself.
Yeah.
She actually brought it home with her just as a token.
Can you get a picture?
Oh yeah, I'm going to go see her next week now that she's
send me a picture. I want to ask if I can share it on my show.
Sure.
Please.
But the other thing is that she said to me, this was during the campaign. She said, "Oh my gosh, Chelsea, how is this narrative about horse dewormer spreading?" She's like, "I can't understand it." She said, "I lived in Southeast Asia for 15 years. And every single time myself, my husband, or my children are sick, we go to the doctor and they give us horse dewormer."
Yeah.
And she's like, "So every single billion, like all the billions of people who live in Southeast Asia, and all of the ones who have, spread out across the world and now live in North America or Europe or South America or Africa, they know that this horse dewormer is actually the standard protocol for viral treatment in Southeast Asia."
Yep. Yeah. I saw a video. Somebody sent me a video on Twitter, I think, just a 40-second video. A woman walks into a pharmacy or something like that and asked for the COVID pack, and they handed her a COVID pack, and she goes over to, just outside and opens it all up, and she pulls out, first thing, horse dewormer. Yes. And I was like, she's like, "Look," and then, pack of 7 or 10, whatever, for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
How?
Like, how can you not have questions about that?
Right.
And she's like, my friend's point was, all of these billions of people know this.
Yep.
They know that this is the treatment for viral infection.
Yep.
And somehow no one is saying it out loud.
We're not allowed to talk about it.
She's being prescribed it more times than she can count.
Yeah.
So it's horrifying. And, if we can just like empower and encourage people to ask questions.
Yeah.
Like it's not morally wrong to ask a question. It's actually, ethically, it is the right place to be.
Yeah. I was raised to believe that there are no stupid questions. I feel like I found a few exceptions to that rule. I feel like I've been, but I'm okay to be a fool. I'm okay to say that I don't know that. I'm okay to say, you're going to have to go over that one more time for me. I'm in the slow lane here. And
Mhm.
I like to understand the opposition's argument. I like to read their argument. I like to not inhabit their argument necessarily, but I like to really understand, and
Mhm.
or to do my best to understand, even if I can't. And that begins with asking questions. That begins with testing the fence and figuring out what the parameters of this. What's the shape of this? What does this look like? And
Yeah.
just like flat Earth, the COVID stuff is like, you can get to certain areas, you can ask certain questions, but once you get to certain points, you're like, okay, we can't go there, we can't go there, we can't go there, we can't go there. And it seems to be expanding. And the questions that I have are expanding as well. Like the places that we can't go, expanding. The questions that I have,
Yes.
expanding, and the answers getting fewer and further between. And so
Yeah.
that's it's terrible. Okay, last words, last thoughts. Where can people find you?
Where can people find me? The best place to find me is at Chelsea Hillier on Twitter.
Okay.
It's really the only platform that I use. I also am working with No More Lockdowns, of course, so you can check out nomorlockdowns.ca. We're starting a new program through No More Lockdowns called Make Ready. That is going to be, I think, really fantastic and hopefully empowering for people, and really focused on, you know, readiness, preparedness, but also community building. Everything that we do tries to be, focused on community building and making sure that people are connected, because we are all so isolated and divided right now.
Yeah.
So we're trying to counter that. So you can find me, Chelsea at nomorlockdowns.ca. I haven't been using that email too much, but it's there, and you can still reach me at info@chelseahillierppc.ca as well.
Wonderful. And thanks for watching, everybody. Again, I'm going to continue having these conversations. If you'd like to come and chat with me, let me know and we'll figure it out. And thank you very much, Chelsea, for joining me today. I appreciate your time. Maybe we'll check in again in a few months and see how things are going. We'll talk about flat Earth.
Yes.
All right. You stick around. I'm going to say goodbye to everybody. So thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time. And I don't know. You can find me all the other places I always tell you about. So we'll just sign off. Thanks for watching, everybody.